With Radio Algeria International, you will not miss a single major political or economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
In today's top stories, in a message, the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, said that the Algerian state has placed scientific research and innovation at the very heart of its strategic priorities, where universities and research laboratories represent the bearing heart of this innovative dynamic. New Zionist attacks have been carried out in Lebanon as President Joseph Aoun insisted that any direct negotiations with the Zionist entity must be preceded by a ceasefire. The African Union has called on the international community not to abandon Sudan and to step up effort to secure a ceasefire. Hello and welcome to Radio Algeria International. I'm Jamal Slimani. Prime Minister Sefi Gharaib presided here in Algiers over the awards ceremony for the second edition of the President of the Republic's Prize for Innovative Researchers. In a message addressed by the President of the Republic to the participants read on his behalf by Mr. Sefi Gharaib at the opening ceremony, he said, "It is not merely an academic occasion, but a clear expression of the state's direction and the will of its institutions, which are steadfastly striving to consolidate Algeria's position amongst nations that produce knowledge rather than merely consume it, and that harness technology rather than merely importing it." The meeting coincides with the commemoration of Science Day, or Yom al-Ilm, on the 16th of April each year, honoring the legacy of Imam Abdelhamid bin Badis, who realized early on that the struggle for liberation begins in the classroom, and that the development of the individual is the solid foundation for the building of nations. The President said in the message that the Algerian state has placed scientific research and innovation at the very heart of its strategic priorities, where universities and research laboratories represent the bearing or the beating heart of this innovative dynamic. To this end, he added that the state has increased and continue to increase funding for scientific research and university infrastructure and to award scholarships to the most distinguished professors, researchers, and talented students. Representing the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, the President of the Council of the Nation, Mr. Azouz Nasri, took part today in Brazzaville, Republic of the Congo, in the inauguration and swearing-in ceremony of Congolese President Denis Sassou Nguesso, re-elected following the presidential election held on the 15th of March. The Minister Delegate to the Minister of National Defense and Chief of Staff of the People's National Army, Army General Said Chingriha, oversees at the National Army Club in Bnimsus in the 1st Military Region the opening of a symposium organized by the General Directorate of Documentation and External Security entitled External Threats in Light of Geopolitical and Technological Transformations, Security Challenges and Strategic Stakes. Mr. Sharfi has the details.
The Army General stated that the scientific event reflected the People's National Army's effort to strengthen anticipatory thinking and strategic foresight to better understand global changes and their impact on Algeria's security. He noted that these developments had created a complex international environment marked by uncertainty and competition, while advances in cyberspace, AI, and data had reshaped global power by making control of knowledge a key factor. He added that foresight and scenario building were essential to strategic decision-making, stressed that Algeria continued to strengthen its strategic vigilance to remain a reliable and influential actor. The Army General further stated that the National Army, under the leadership of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, was working to enhance operational readiness, modernize equipment, and upgrade training to face current and future threats, and ensure national security and stability. He then announced the opening of the symposium, followed by presentations and expert discussions on external threats and strategic issues.
Pope Leo XIV has affirmed that the official visit he paid to Algeria was a wonderful opportunity to continue building bridges and strengthening dialogue, expressing his gratitude to the Algerian authorities who made this visit possible. Masoud Sharfi again.
On board of the flight heading to Algiers to Yaoundé, Cameroon, the second leg of his African tour, Pope Leo XIV told the journalist accompanying him on this trip that his visit to Algeria constituted a wonderful opportunity to continue building bridges and strengthening dialogue. He said that his visit to Algeria, especially Annaba, promoted St. Augustine's message of unity and mutual respect despite religious differences, reflected in his meetings, notably at the Great Mosque of Algiers, where he stressed that people can live together in peace, while highlighting the symbolic value of his visit to major religious sites and thanking Algerian authorities for facilitating the trip. In this regard, international media highlighted the historic visit of Pope Leo XIV to Algeria, emphasizing its strong message of peace, dialogue and coexistence, as well as the warm welcome he received from the Algerian authorities and society. Vatican News described the second day of the visit as carrying a historical, personal and spiritual dimension for the Pope and recalled his identification with St. Augustine as his spiritual father. Info Cattolica reported his thanks to Algerian authorities and his call for cooperation on peace, justice, integral development and communication. The Belfast Telegraph highlighted St. Augustine as a bridge builder and quoted the Pope's call for peace and building bridges for peace and coexistence, while the Associated Press said he was walking in the footprints of St. Augustine, describing the visit to Annaba as a spiritual return to roots amid calls for peace. Other media, including Africa Report and Al-Quds Al-Arabi, stressed the visit's historical, diplomatic and symbolic dimensions, linking spiritual heritage with dialogue and contemporary relations.
Ambassador Ammar Benjama highlighted Algeria's progress and priorities in population, technology and research within sustainable development during the 59th session of the Commission on Population and Development, which is due to end tomorrow. During his statement, the diplomat stressed the importance of integrating technological innovation and scientific research into public policies to address demographic challenges, while emphasizing Algeria's efforts to promote entrepreneurship, particularly among young people, as a key driver of economic growth and job creation. The ambassador noted that the country has launched initiatives to support startups, improve access to financing and strengthen innovation ecosystems to boost the economy and harness the potential of its youth in an increasingly digitalized world.
Algeria prioritizes knowledge-based economy and startups. The numbers of startups is set to grow significantly by 2030, and we are sharing our experience with our neighbors. Algeria hosts annually the African Conference on Startups. The fourth conference concluded with the adoption of the Algiers Declaration focusing on artificial intelligence and innovating financing. Furthermore, we maintain a strong position in innovation, ranking second among Arab nations in active patents. In the meantime, women are playing a key role in entrepreneurship, accounting for nearly half of startup owners. Algeria strongly enshrines equal rights for men and women and social protection, particularly through preventing violence against women and girls.
The 59th session of the Commission on Population and Development brings together representatives from different countries to discuss the role of technology and research in shaping sustainable demographic policies in a context marked by rapid social and economic changes. Now, the Secretary of State to the Minister of Foreign Affairs in charge of the national community abroad, Mr. Soufiane Shaib, has received at the headquarters of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs the Regional Director of the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, for the Middle East and North Africa, Mr. Edward Bainberg. Masoud Sharfi has more in this report.
The meeting was an opportunity to review the privileged relations between Algeria and UNICEF and to examine ways to strengthen them through ambitious programs and projects in areas of common interest, particularly those related to the support and promotion of children's rights and well-being, with emphasis placed on Algeria's pioneering role in this field, its efforts at continental and international levels, and opportunities to further strengthen cooperation with the UN agency. Earlier, the Secretary General of the Ministry of Health, Mr. Mohamed Talhi, also received Mr. Eduardo Beybeder in a meeting dedicated to exchanging views and strengthening dialogue on the state and prospects of bilateral cooperation. The UN official hailed UN programs in Algeria and its preventive public health approach, reviewed cooperation in vaccination and mental and maternal and child health, commended the introduction of HPV vaccination and Algeria's leading role, and called for stronger joint efforts to support health care and intensify nutrition and anti-obesity programs. Mr. Talhi, for his part, stressed that prevention is a strategic priority of the national health system and that improving healthcare coverage remains a top priority, highlighting efforts to expand nationwide coverage through twinning between health institutions, deploying medical staff to southern regions, and creating specialized health hubs, reinforcing Algeria's role as a regional healthcare reference. The discussions addressed the results of the multiple indicator cluster survey and the launch of its 7th round to improve data collection and evidence-based policy making, while both sides stressed the importance of strengthening cooperation under the 2028-2032 strategic framework between the Ministry of Health and UNICEF to support the national health system and health security.
As you followed in our top stories, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, has called on the international community not to abandon Sudan and to step up efforts to secure a ceasefire. Mahmoud Ali Yusuf told the media on the sidelines of an international conference on Sudan held on Wednesday in Germany, Sudan is in dire situation. However, the lack of media coverage and the shifting attention towards the conflict in the Middle East are of great concern to the conflict. Mahmoud Ali Yusuf also believed that the Berlin conference could help to revive international support for humanitarian aid and for diplomatic efforts aimed at bringing an end to hostilities. The International Organization for Migration has sounded the alarm over a humanitarian crisis that is steadily worsening in Sudan, calling for a greater international mobilization and a $277 million in funding to address needs now deemed critical both within the country and in neighboring states. From Khartoum, the head of the International Organization for Migration mission in Sudan, Mohammed Rafat, spoke of the pandemic of the lack of accountability in the country.
Conflict is a pandemic of lack of accountability to those who are taking actions against international humanitarian law. I give an example what we have seen in Wedenor village when 250 were killed in one day. There was no action or anyone was taken accountable for this. And a couple of months later, we saw the attacks on Zamzam camp where we saw hundreds of thousands of induced displacement and human rights violation, killing of dozens of humanitarian workers that was not taken any action later about. And then a couple of months later, we saw the attacks on Al-Fashir, and we have all seen the videos and the atrocities that were conducted in Al-Fashir, and again, massive displacement and massive flow of people running from those violations. So if there is a common factor here we can track is that human rights violation is being used as a factor for displacement. No accountability is being taken for those who are conducting this. And then we will continue to see the same trends.
That was the head of the International Organization for Migration mission in Sudan, Mohammed Rafat. Now, tensions in the Middle East continue to escalate against backdrop of open clashes and growing diplomatic efforts. Against this backdrop, the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, Mohammad Baghar Ghalibaf, stated that establishing a ceasefire in Lebanon is just as important as in Iran, emphasizing that Tehran is closely monitoring developments following a conversation with his Lebanese counterpart Nabih Berri. Meanwhile, regional and international contacts are intensifying. The chief of the Pakistani army, Asim Munir, held a meeting with the Ghalibaf in Iran at a time marked by potential progress in negotiations between Tehran and Washington. The visit came shortly after the United States raised the possibility of resuming dialogue with the Islamic Republic. On the ground, violence persists. An Israeli attack on a vehicle on the road between Beirut and Damascus left at least one person dead, whilst bombings in southern Lebanon destroyed a strategic bridge connecting key regions of the country. Addressing the Zionist army's halt of a UN interim force in Lebanon convoy carrying military and civilian peacekeepers and contractors from Beirut to its Naqoura headquarters, the UN spokesperson Farhan Haq said this is not an isolated incident.
Our peacekeeping colleagues continue to report violations. Yesterday afternoon, a routine convoy transporting military and civilian peacekeepers, along with essential contractors from Beirut to UNIFIL headquarters, was halted by Israel Defense Forces personnel a few kilometers from its destination in Naqoura. UN-marked vehicles were eventually allowed to proceed. However, local contractors were required to return to Beirut under security arrangements, despite the convoy having been fully deconflicted in advance, including their presence being explicitly cleared. This is not an isolated incident. Similar restrictions through physical roadblocks or the reversal of prior clearances have affected both peacekeepers and essential personnel who support them. These actions raise serious concerns about the timely delivery of critical supplies, including food, fuel, and water to UNIFIL positions, particularly along the Blue Line. We reiterate our call on the IDF to respect agreed arrangements and to uphold its obligations to ensure the safety and security of peacekeepers, as well as the freedom of movement of all UNIFIL patrols and logistical convoys.
On the political front, Lebanese President Joseph Aoun insisted that any direct negotiations with Israel must be preceded by a ceasefire. However, contradictory signals are emerging from various quarters. Official Lebanese sources indicated that they were unaware of any imminent contacts with the Zionist entity. U.S. President Donald Trump also alluded to possible talks between the two countries, which, if they were to take place, would mark an unprecedented development following years of strained relations. More than 36 Democrat supporters in the U.S. supported an effort by Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders on Wednesday to block arms sales to the Zionist entity, signaling a growing discontent in the party with the wars in Gaza and Iran. Two resolutions to block U.S. sales of bulldozers and bombs to Israel were opposed by all Republicans and rejected, but Sanders has repeatedly forced votes on the issue to put pressure on his colleagues, both Democrats and Republicans, to oppose the occupation's authorities.
60% of our people here in the United States live paycheck to paycheck. They are struggling to pay for groceries, for housing, for health care, and increasingly the ability to fill up their gas tanks in their cars in order to get to work. We also have a $37 trillion national debt. Bottom line, the American people, whether they are Democrats, Republicans, or independents, conservatives, moderates, or progressives, want to make certain that their tax dollars are spent responsibly and in strong and growing numbers. They do not want us to continue spending billions of their taxpayer dollars in support of the illegal, horrific, and expansionist war policies of the Netanyahu government in Israel.
That was U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders. Palestinian political and human rights organizations condemned the dangerous policies pursued by the Zionist occupation against Palestinian prisoners, documenting the human rights catastrophe they are experiencing behind prison bars, the latest manifestation of which was the approval of the death penalty law against them. In this regard, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas expressed his strong condemnation of the repression, abuse, and brutal attacks to which prisoners in the Zionist occupation prisoners are subjected, which affect their human dignity and constitute a flagrant violation of all international laws and conventions related to prisoners' rights. Now in Yemen, Director of Operations and Advocacy at the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, Edem Wosornu, said that more than 22 million people, nearly half of Yemen's population, need humanitarian aid, and that number is rising.
Across Yemen, millions of people are surviving day by day. A decade of conflict has left people hanging by a thread. More than 22 million people are surviving day to day. More than 22 million people, nearly half of the population across Yemen, need humanitarian aid, and that number is rising. This crisis is hitting the most vulnerable first and hardest. Hunger is tightening its grip. More than 18 million people face severe hunger. 2 out of every families are forced to skip meals every day. Women and children, of course, as always, hit the hardest. The nutrition crisis continues unabated. 2.2 million children under the age of 5 are acutely malnourished, and 1.3 million pregnant and breastfeeding women face life-threatening complications due to malnutrition.
The official of OCHA warned that Yemen's health system is collapsing, with 2 out of every 5 health facilities not fully functional, leaving more than 19 million who need health care without it. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and as you know, today is the 16th of April, which is Yawm al-Ilm, and on this occasion, Algeria celebrates knowledge and pays tribute to the role of education and scholars in building society and preserving national identity. Next is a program on this national event.
Hello out there and welcome. As every year on April 16th, Algeria